Alberta and Calgary specifically, they've become much more diverse cities. I don't think that you're going to see that major boom and bust cycle happen the way it has in the past. There's too much pressure coming into the city. Hey everyone, it's JP Gulbis, a longtime coach here at Rockstar. I think I've been around for actually May 4th. It will be 16 years. I don't know what year that was that I started, but anyway, 16 years. So I've been around for a while. Some people have been asking about out of province investing. I have my license in Alberta as well, so I've been helping investors from Ontario make some of their moves in Alberta as well. So kind of wanted to just summarize a few points and a few of the differences, Alberta versus Ontario, some of the pros, some of the cons, and just give you a little bit more information on how Alberta compares to Ontario. So one of the first things that I thought was great when I started working out there is, and when I noticed when I bought property out there is, every expense that you have, they don't have a provincial sales tax. So you're only paying 5% GST. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does add up a little bit at the end of it, where every expense you have, whether you're getting something for the house, whether it's furniture or you're buying paint or whatever, a tap, it's 5% GST instead of 13% HST. The other thing too is on your purchase, there is no land transfer tax. So there's an automatic savings there, which is significant. An average purchase of, let's say, $650,000, you're probably going to be saving like 13 grand or something in land transfer tax. So that is also really nice. When it comes to the Landlord and Tenant Board, because that's something that we've been battling here in Ontario, is just the structural issues with Ontario and the Landlord and Tenant Board here. There, it's a lot more balanced. The rules are much more fairly weighted between landlords and tenants. And if you do have a tenant that's in arrears, you can go through the motions of evicting that tenant in basically 2 to 3 months and they're gone, which is, as we know, it's a little bit different than here, which can take quite a while. And the other thing too is the way that their rules are with the leases. Even if you have an active lease, let's say you signed a lease in January and it's a 1-year lease, and something changes in your life in July, you can give them 90 days notice and have them leave. You've got to sell the property. You don't have to sell that property with a lease in place. You can just simply give them notice, say, I've sold the property, I'm sorry, but you have to go. So there's some nice things around that make it a little easier and a lot easier on the landlord if something changes and they have to make a move. And then of course, prices are a bit lower there, and then rents are a little bit more in line with carrying costs, especially with single family homes, whether that's a townhouse, a semi, or a detached home. If we're going to talk about multi-units a little bit, there it's not so drastic. And there also the multi-unit sort of existing infrastructure and inventory that's ever there, it's very small, at least in the Calgary market. It's a little bit different in Edmonton, where there's going to be a little bit more. But based on what you're paying for the property and what you're achieving in rent, it's not dissimilar to certain markets in Ontario compared to probably Hamilton, as the Calgary market, let's say. There's just not much there. You've got basically, I looked this morning, there was 20 multi-unit listings in Calgary that ranged from $850,000 to $6.4 million in the entire city. And when it comes to the rents, they're not that dissimilar as well.
Hey everybody, you can now book a free real estate investing strategy call with a Rockstar investing coach, speak with an experienced real estate investor, and get their insight on the next best step to take for you and your situation. The link to book a call at your convenience is in the description below. And now back to the video.
If you're looking at an apartment building, depending on the size of it, it can also range from anywhere from around $1,300 for maybe like a 1-bedroom up to about $1,800, again, depending on the unit and how nice it is, where it is. Location matters in Calgary as well. For a 2-bedroom, let's say at $1,800. And then if you want to do like a conversion property, you're looking at about $2,200 for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath up, and about $1,800 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath down. Single family homes there, I would say, are much more in demand when it comes to the rental market. Just the natural history of the city is they had space to build. It's a younger city. They don't have as much of the existing old inventory that they have around the Greater Golden Horseshoe. If you look at the history of this area, it's just been around a lot longer. I looked it up, it was something like 70 years. There was just more happening here in the Toronto area and the Greater Golden Horseshoe as opposed to Calgary, which was just a small town. You've got St. Catharines and Hamilton and Brantford and Kitchener and London and Barrie and all that. There you've basically got Calgary and some of those surrounding smaller towns, Airdrie, Cochrane, and Okotoks, they just don't have, they're smaller populations, they just don't have the existing infrastructure that was ever built for older homes that can be chopped up into multi-units. So it's a little bit different there. Rentals of single family homes is a lot more common and a lot more in demand. I would say that it is a little bit different than it is here. There's probably a little bit more. I know it's softened a little bit here in Ontario, but I would probably focus a little bit more on the sort of the single family home market myself. And because of also the price point that you can get out there, for example, you can get a really nice 3 or 4 bedroom house with 3 or 4 bathrooms in a nice area of Calgary for $750,000, and you might be renting that, depending on the condition, upwards of $3,800 a month. So those numbers can really impact your carrying costs. And that will sort of range that 620 to 750 price range for a detached home, and the rent will be like 28 to 3,800. For a semi or a town, it's going to be a little bit different. You're gonna rent those for 24 to 2,800, but then you can also buy those at the lower end for 450 to 550, depending on where it is and the condition that it is. You still have to go there and balance it all out, and where is it located, what condition is it in, all of that stuff does matter still, but that just gives you an idea of the difference in the price point. Now, some of the drawbacks, I kind of touched on it with the multi-unit thing, but Calgary and then the surrounding towns, you got Airdrie, Cochrane, and Okotoks. I know there's Chestermere on the east side, but these are small communities, and when you add all of them up with Calgary itself, you're only at about 1.7 million people as compared to the Greater Golden Horseshoe, where you're like something like 9 million people. So you could perceive that as a drawback because there's so many people that are here, so your market would appear to be a lot bigger. Everything is relative, and looking at what's available in single family rentals in Airdrie, Cochrane, and Okotoks, they're almost non-existent. And I know that when they come up, they get snapped up pretty quick. That's something that I think is a positive. In the past too, you could make an argument that, it's not an argument, it was true, that Alberta was sort of a boom and bust province because it was so heavily, it's basically the energy capital of the country. If this was 2015, I'd probably still agree with that. But at this point, from what I've seen over the last number of years, there's a lot of diversification in the province and in the cities in general. Alberta and Calgary specifically, they've become much more diverse cities. I don't think that you're going to see that major boom and bust cycle happen the way it has in the past. There's too much pressure coming into the city. People were flocking to Alberta from Ontario and the Greater Golden Horseshoe and the Lower Mainland in Vancouver because the housing there is still, like I said, you could get for $750,000 a nice 2,200 square foot house with 3 or 4 bedrooms and 3 to 4 bathrooms for basically half the cost. So that's not going to change. I do think that there's going to be a lot of pressure still heading to Alberta. One other thing that with the small population is if you're interested in student rentals, it's a tough city. Calgary is a tough city for student rentals. They don't have the same number of universities that Southern Ontario has, and the dynamic around student housing is totally different. So you just don't have big sort of neighborhoods around the universities where you can just see 5 and 6 and 7 bedroom homes for rent or available to kids. There is the odd one that's around, and I don't want to say it doesn't exist at all. It's just not exactly the same. You do see some 7 bedroom homes, and they rent for about $700 a room, but they might be set up more like a rooming house. You rent by the room rather than getting a bunch of kids together on one lease and renting the entire house. And then some of the other housing needs for the student is going to be, apartments or people just renting out rooms in their house, or maybe basement suites or something like that. But it's just not the same dynamic. On the flip side to that, they do have other things, like you can go to the mountains, and for example, in Canmore, that, like it or not like it, I know there was some but of developers coming in, it's basically going to double the size of residential housing in that town, and you've got really nice opportunities for Airbnb and short-term rentals where you can make good money on them, and so that's an advantage there where you've got that. The other thing about Alberta is there's no rent control, so it's a much fairer system operating on supply and demand. So if there's a lot of rental properties available for whatever reason, then you may have to bring the rent down a little bit in order to find a tenant. But if you feel like you need to increase the rent, then you can absolutely do that, and there isn't a 2.5% limit on the percentage that you can increase it, like let's say there is in Ontario. So I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about. But yeah, if you have any questions about purchasing, or maybe you've got a property already that you want to sell in Alberta, or you want to buy in Alberta, feel free to reach out, and happy to help you, and we can navigate both provinces with you. And if you want to book a free strategy call, there'll be a link in the description below, and yeah, happy to get together and chat about what you want to do in Alberta.